So this is the second scenario, and there were quite a few things the researcher did well. First of all, they carried out a risk assessment of the study, which ensured that the environment in which the experiment was carried out is safe and the facilities used were adequate and suitable. And the idea behind the assessment is to reduce the risk of injury as much as possible. Another good thing the researcher did well was supervise the participants when required, which was spoken about earlier in the last slide about supervision. This links with another aspect the researcher did well, which was health and safety. So this means the researcher ensured the participants were always safe and they were using the equipment sensibly. This therefore suggests they had a very professional conduct about them, and having this professional conduct means they know what they're doing in the experiment, they make everyone feel safe, and they go about explaining the procedures very well, so every participant has a complete understanding about what's going to go on. Finally, this then links on to the last thing they did well, which was protecting them from physical harm, as they were always supervised during any event they performed, which completely minimised the chances of injury to them. However, to counterbalance, the researcher did do a few things wrong. So first of all, the girls were chosen from the experiment and therefore may not have wanted to actually take part, which means they gave no informed consent. This consent form would have been exactly the same as the criteria as the parental consent form, except as the girls in this study were over 18, they were now deemed to give their own consent. As mentioned before, this could lead to a consequence like imprisonment because it's a legal requirement. So if you don't actually have the consent, it's a big punishment. Either that or they could be fined a lot of money. And then to improve for next time, they should let girls volunteer for the study so that getting consent from them to partake will be a lot easier. Another issue with this study was the fact that the researcher didn't keep the results of the study confidential and spread them all over the internet. This is very serious and so could lead to a consequence of a massive fine again or a loss of job for a few months while the ethics committee decides whether you're actually allowed to come back to your job. Finally, the researcher deceived them by telling them that all of their performances will increase due to the Lucozade, which wasn't actually true because half of them had a placebo. It was actually commission deception, so this means that the researcher deceived them into thinking one thing when it was actually another. This isn't too serious of an issue, and so there wouldn't be much of a consequence. There could be a fine, but that would be to the extent of it. The way to improve deceiving them for next time would be if the researcher debriefed them at the end of the study. A debrief is where the researcher talks the participants through how the study went and tell them they had been deceived and what actually happened. The idea behind this is ensuring the participants leave the experiment happy and knowing what actually happened, rather than them leaving confused and uncomfortable. So finally, we have the last scenario. One of the good things the researcher did was collecting volunteers for the experiment and receiving informed consent from them, which again I've spoken about earlier in the video. This is once again good because the participants understand everything about the experiment that's included and are aware of the risks and hazards that could occur. As well as the consent form being filled out, they have also performed a medical screening questionnaire to the participants, which is good because they get a good understanding of any of their mental needs and disabilities. However, the researcher didn't do some aspects which were very important. The first one is they deceived the participants. However, this time it was omission deception. So this means the researcher leaves out a certain piece of information. In this case, it was the fact that they weren't told they were only going to be working on the leg warm-ups rather than the whole body. A consequence of this would be just like the commission deception in the last scenario. Therefore, it wouldn't be too bad. It could be a fine or ethical training needed on how to perform a proper debrief, which would be the improvement again for this ethical issue. Next, the researcher forced a participant to carry on, meaning they ignored the right to withdraw code. This is fairly serious because not only is it in the consent form that they can withdraw at any point, but it's psychologically harming them as they have lost motivation to carry on, but yet you're still forcing them to get on with it. Therefore, it could lead to a tribunal where a fine could be present or a suspension for quite a while. And then finally, the most serious aspect of it all was that the researcher didn't keep the data safe. So they're ignoring the Data Protection Act, As they shared it on the internet, this could lead to a straight imprisonment because of what the 1998 Data Protection Act says about the security of personal information. And another consequence that would occur is the loss of BASES accreditation. So this can mean that you are now out of a job and no more clearance to conduct any future research in the sport and exercise science industry would be allowed.